Hello and welcome back. You're now a pro at managing your projects locally, pushing them to GitHub and even cloning existing ones. But as your projects grow, you will start noticing something. A lot of these files aren't actually part of your source code. Think about temporary files, build outputs, or even sensitive credentials. Do you really want Git tracking all of that junk? Absolutely not. Today, we are diving into an incredibly important and often overlooked Git feature, the .gitignore file. Now, this tiny file will save you a lot of headaches, keep your repositories clean, and also prevent accidental commits of unwanted or even dangerous files. Let's make sure your Git repos are spotless. So, let's first talk about why do we need these ignore files. So, why do you even need to tell Git to ignore files? Isn't it smart enough? Well, Git can track everything, but not everything should be tracked. Now, there are several key reasons for it. One is for noise reduction. Many files are generated automatically by your development environment or build process. Think node underscore modules in a JavaScript project or targets in your Java or venv in Python. These are huge, constantly changing, and irrelevant for version control. Ignoring them makes Git status output much cleaner. Then you have sensitive information. Files containing API keys, database credentials, or any secrets should never be committed to a public or even a private repository. .gitignore is your first line of defense here. And then you have platform or OS specific files. So files like .ds underscore store on Mac OS, thumbs.db on Windows, or star.iml for IntelliJ IDEA are specific to your operating system or IDE. They are irrelevant to other developers or and can cause unnecessary merge conflicts. And then finally, we have optimizing the repository size. So large binary files like your compiled executables or temporary build artifacts can bloat your repository, making cloning and pushing slower. In short, you only want to track essential source code and configuration that everyone on your team or anyone cloning your project needs. Everything else, just ignore it. So let's talk about how you can create and configure this .gitignore file. So this .gitignore file, it's a plain text file that tells Git which files or directories to ignore. It's usually placed in the root directory of your Git repository. Let's work with our my solo project. So here, let's work with this. Let me go to that project here. So let's work with this. So I'm in my folder over here. Let's simulate some junk files. Imagine this is a Node.js project just for the sake of example. So let's create a directory. So let's call this as node modules, and let me do an echo. So let's say API key, and then let's say my super secret key, and then let's write this to .env. So here under this node modules, I should have the, oh sorry, it's there. It's so here the file is created. Now let's create a build output. So echo compiled code, and let's write this to build slash main .js. Oh, I don't have the build directory, so let me quickly create that and let's run this. So they should create the main.js file. Now, if I run the git status command, you can see I have the .env, I have the build directory as well. So git sees all these untracked files and directories. Now, this is the noise we want to eliminate. We don't want this. So this is where we can use the .gitignore file. So we'll first create the .gitignore file. So let's use the touch command. So .gitignore. So here we have created the file. Now let's open up this file, and we'll add some patterns. So each line that we add here will be a new pattern. So let's say node underscore modules. So that's one pattern. Then .env, which is for the environment variables. Then the build outputs. Then let's say ds underscore store for macOS specific files, then dot vs code. So this is for IDE specific files. Example is your visual code in this case. And then I also want to ignore all the files with the dot extension. So we'll use this star dot log. So anywhere if you have this files that ends with the dot log extension, ignore it. We'll save this file. Now let's run the git status command once again. And now if you observe, earlier if you can recall, it was showing us the env file as well as the build directory. Now because we are ignoring it now, git is not tracking it and it will show this particular file only. Amazing. So all those untracked files have disappeared from the git status output. Git is now ignoring them and the only untracked file left is our new .gitignore file itself. Now, you should always commit your .gitignore file to your repository. This ensures that everyone collaborating on the project or anyone who clones it automatically ignores the same set of files. So we will add this. So .gitignore. We will commit this. So let's say m, and this will be a feature. So let's say add .gitignore to ignore common dev files. And then finally, the ideal step would be to push this to your repo. I'm not going to do that here, but you can try it out. Now let's look at some common patterns you will use in your .gitignore file. So here I have a sample file that I've created. I'll share a link to this. So the first we have is ignoring a specific file. So this ignores mysecret.txt in the same directory as .gitignore. Then ignoring a specific directory. So this ignores the logs directory and everything inside it, anywhere in the repository. The trailing slash specifies it's a directory. Then ignoring files with specific extension. So this ignores all files ending with .log or .temp anywhere in your repository. Then this particular line ignores config.js only in the src directory, not anywhere else. So the leading slash specifies the pattern should only match from the root of the repository. Now, sometimes you want to ignore a whole directory, but not a specific file within it. So in this case, I'm telling ignore this entire directory, but not this specific file. So you can see this negating pattern that I'm using here. So everything inside this directory will be ignored except this particular file. So here, this is an example of a typical web project. So we're ignoring the node modules, environment variables, build outputs, logs, OS generated files, and then IDE specific files. Now you can find comprehensive .gitignore templates for various languages and frameworks online. A great source is gitignore.io. So you can type in your tech stack, let's say example Python, and this will create a perfect .gitignore for you. So let me create. Okay, let me do this once again. So Python create, and this will create you the perfect .gitignore file that you can use. So this will basically specify all the files that you will need to ideally ignore. So likewise, you can mention anything. So let's say for Windows, and then create, and this will show you all the files that you can put in your .gitignore to ignore the files. So you've just learned how to wrangle unwanted files with the .gitignore file. You now understand why it's crucial to ignore generated files, sensitive data, and OS specific clutter, how to create and configure your .gitignore file with various patterns, and why committing your .gitignore is best practice for team collaboration. This simple file makes a huge difference in keeping your repositories clean, focused, and secure. In our next video, we will look at the basics of GitHub UI interface, how to navigate in the repo, how to make changes directly in GitHub, how to check the commits, among other things. If you found this video helpful for tidying up your repos, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what files you used to accidentally commit. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.